Hello, my name is Justin Bright, and welcome to Kerbal Space Program version 1.8.1 in my next small step RP-1 career mode playthrough. And as you can see, we are time warping ourselves along. We are just days away from our transfer window out to Jupiter, so that is what we are going to be working on next. I'm just doing a little fussing around with the astronaut courses for training purposes. I've discovered that it's not really necessary to give them like landing training and like space station module training. The only thing that actually matters is the training for the module or capsule that you are launching your astronauts in. So that is what we are going to plan for in the future. But yeah, we are just getting that set up so that we are ready, because we, with how long those astronaut training times are, we need to plan well in advance. Another thing to mention while I'm kind of fussing around here is I think I may have over-leveraged myself on R&D points a little bit. I kind of swung way far in the other direction as far as having a little bit too much of that. So now we're going to start focusing on vehicle assembly building points in the future. But yeah, we are just about ready to just move on forward to this Jupiter transfer window. So let's get right to it. Ignition. And we have liftoff of a Titan III BAS-2 launcher that is bringing up our Pioneer Venus spacecraft into low Earth orbit before departing for Jupiter. Did I say Pioneer Venus? I meant Pioneer Jupiter. Yes, that's right, because this is my first spacecraft that is heading out to an outer planet. Yeah, so I am super excited to head out that way. I think that I am going to be able to do all kinds of really interesting things with this spacecraft above and beyond our initial objective of getting to Jupiter. So that is what the plan is for now. Make sure we actually have this open so I can see what the heck is going on. But yeah, we are heading on our way up, and this is a version of the Titan III that I have not launched before. This was a theoretical version called the Titan III BAS-2. It has, well, it had, I don't think it used Algols, but it basically used two solid rocket boosters that were relatively small. Or did it even have that? I'm not even sure the original Titan III BAS-2 configuration had that. It just used better LR-87s. But anyways, it's kind of a very small version of the Titan. Whoa. Okay, those came off a little bit early. Good to know. Half a second early was too early for that particular version of this solid rocket booster. But yeah, so the Titan IIIe, with the gigantic solid rocket boosters, I figured if I could make a smaller, cheaper version of that, that would be sufficient, because my Atlas Centaurs are not particularly useful. Those would be my Tela Centaur rockets that I've used a couple of. But I find that my thrust to weight ratio off of the pad is incredibly low, and that makes it not super reliable as far as how much the level of steering and gravity losses by the time it actually gets to where it's going is pretty bad compared to something that has a little bit more oomph off the pad, such as this. And part of that is because I'm still using like the Atlas Agena version of the engines for Atlas Centaur operations. So the Atlas, there's like one more config that is the actual one that was used on the Atlas Centaur rockets, and those have higher thrust. And I have to assume that's why my stuff does not work quite like I expect it to. But this should hopefully all work out just fine. I don't know what that's about, but but anyways, this should work just fine as we are getting ourselves up and out of the atmosphere. This is going to leave our Centaur upper stage with 6,800 meters per second of delta V, which should be plenty to do what we are trying to do on our way to Jupiter. So let's just go ahead and time warp this forward a little bit. We are going to have the fairings come off here any moment. Any moment now. There we go. So there we go. Yep, just a regular old no MLI, or I think no MLI, Centaur upper stage, and then that is our Pioneer Jupiter, which we went through a little bit of the design discussion on that before. And it's got my very first inline reaction wheel, which I'm kind of excited to test out and see how that thing works. So yeah, this is a relatively simple spacecraft using just what I have, and I just had to wait long enough to get the better communications equipment out. But now that I have that, we are going to be able to launch this out and hopefully communicate all the way back from the outer planets. And one of the things that I had to wait on was not just better dishes on ground stations, but also to send out a 2-meter parabolic dish, which I would have gone even bigger if I had the capability to do so. But you launch with what you have during your transfer windows, not what you wish you had. In any case, what we are launching is essentially going to be essentially going to be an analog of Pioneer 10. So this was an American space probe launched in 1972. So we are just a couple years late on that, and it weighed a lot less than this particular probe is going. Total weighs, because yeah, it just is quite a bit heavier, because I guess well, I'm not sure why the discrepancy on weight, especially because I'm actually using less equipment than the actual Pioneer 10 did, but you know, whatever. The masses don't always line up exactly. But I built a heavier space probe with an engine and fuel and RCS, so that's probably a big part of the difference. But anyways, let's not get too hung up on that. The real reason why this is an analog of Pioneer 10 is because it is sharing the same mission. Pioneer 10 was the very first mission that was completed to get to the planet Jupiter. So this was the first space probe that actually made it out there and was able to investigate those the outer planets. And you can see that we have the RTGs on there built, snapped on, the Snap 9 snapped on to give us the power all the way out there, because we cannot in any circumstances count on solar power. But yeah, it was also the first of just 5 objects that we have lobbed so quickly that they were able to attain escape velocity from the solar system. So it is going to maybe do that depending on all of the additional gravity assists that I hit, because that is really why Pioneer 10 managed to get that fast, because they weren't launched at escape velocity from the solar system, but going into the gravity well of Jupiter is going to fling you out at a tremendous velocity, because it is a very large chunker that our gigantic gas giant guardian at the edge of the solar system. But yeah, so that is what I'm hoping to do, is I'm actually hoping to grab a couple gravity assists myself. I have not been successful at doing anything interesting in the inner planets with gravity assists, like trying to use Venus to get closer to Mercury, that sort of thing. I still think that I can make that happen, the Mercury by way of Venus. That's still something that I'd like to try someday, but this is going to be the real demonstration of the power of gravity assists, and I am really excited to get started with that. And we are just a couple seconds away from the completion of our first burn to get into low Earth orbit, and there we go. So we are now successfully in low Earth orbit. Everything is wonderful so far. So we can flip off our ascent guidance, and now let's just immediately get into it and take a look at what things are going to look like on the way out towards Venus, or Jupiter. Do I keep saying Venus? I'm sorry, I mean Jupiter. So there we go. It looks like we are very much right there. Departure in 2 days. Well, I don't have 2 days, unfortunately. I need to go now-ish. 6-5. 6-4. Yeah, that's fine. Do head towards now-ish. So I'm just clicking left on in the this transfer window to find the Anytime Now launch, and the difference in when we go is relatively marginal, because we do want the faster transit, but it's going to be years no matter how you slice this. There we go. That's getting a little bit more granular. That's nice. So yeah, we can do something like this. 6641, and just every little bit that we go down here gets us tens of days. So I'm thinking 6610, and it gets us 3 years, 213 days. We're going to create that node and see what that does for us. So that is a burn in just 24 minutes. So that is perfect, exactly perfect, just what I wanted to see. And that flings us out here at incredible velocity towards Jupiter, and directly, almost directly prograde, with a bit of normal to fix our orbit to make sure that we meet up with Jupiter. And that does fling underneath a little bit. Which is fine, I think. But yeah, so then we would be entering into the sphere of influence of Jupiter, and look at just the incredible bending of trajectory. And this is why Jupiter is such a great gravity assist, and why you should always go there first if you're trying to go anywhere else in the solar system. And indeed we are. So now that we have our trajectory that meets up with Jupiter, let's see what we can do. So I want more patches. I want to see what our trajectory does after we meet Jupiter. And look at that. Look at that. Look at how fast that flings us off into the solar system. So we can use this to our advantage. We want to hit as many outer planets as we possibly can. Saturn is step one. So let's see what we can do to get towards Saturn. And we just need to make sure that as I'm adjusting our trajectory, we're not going inside the planet, which is not helpful in any way. So just small adjustments is what we're looking for. So step one is I need to adjust our normal velocity first before we mess around with the rest of it, so that we are actually getting in at a place where we will be close to Saturn. There we go. See, that seems to have done it. So we want this to be around here, because this is around where we were hitting that before. And there we go. We have our next... Oops. Oh no, what have I done? Ah, I screwed up. I screwed up bad. All right, so that gives us our encounter with Saturn. So let's just make sure that we are good in the Jupiter system. Yes, we seem to be. Very nice. And now we can move on to where we're going to be at Saturn. And you see that we are still even going further. More patches. And we are cruising through the Saturn system now. Jupiter encounter, then out, and then Saturn encounter. More patches. And then I want to see where we go from there. And see, that, I think, puts us on a escape trajectory already. And this is one burn. Like, this is just my burn that leaves the... that leaves Earth. So now we can just continue tweaking. And let's see what Uranus looks like. Just twist that around. And there we go. Now we're hitting Uranus also. Holy crap. So we are already like working on a grand tour here. So we have so from Earth, we are hitting Jupiter, moving from Jupiter and hitting... Did I lose my Saturn? I might have lost my Saturn there. Okay, yeah, I lost my Saturn encounter, so we gotta be careful about that. But we can also actually make a burn, because my spacecraft does have a couple 100 meters per second of delta V, and it doesn't have to be a perfect burn from the start. So I can just say, Uranus, there we go. And then when I get close to this, we can just move this around and just, while we're inside there, just see what we can do to get close, but not mess things up. All right, so that is about as good as I think we're going to get from here, because I don't actually have any connection, gosh darn it. That's my fault for not putting on a decent antenna at this point. But yeah, so... coming in a little bit closer to Uranus, if I can just bring it in and bring a... Oops, not to Uranus. I'm looking to Saturn. Yeah, so you see that Saturn bends my trajectory not very much, because I am really, really far away. So what I've been doing is I've just been trying to bring that in a little bit closer. There we go, because we want to see this bending, because this bending, as Scott Manley may have has much better explained than I, this bending is what gives you your gravity assist. Like the fact that you're going in at one frame of reference and then gravity is bending you off in a different direction so that you leave in a different reference, that is what changes your trajectory. And you see, if I do it like this, then I'm flying way the heck down and out of the solar system in that inclination, because this is mostly a change to my inclination, because I'm going over the top of Saturn here. But if I turn it this way, just edge it in. There we go. Yeah, we get it something like that so that we are not changing our inclination at all. That actually slows our orbit. So we want to go the other way, but that does get us pretty close to an encounter. So yeah, I think that what I'm going to end up needing to do is do this kind of on the way instead of having the one perfect trajectory now. Yeah, in that direction, you see that we actually gain velocity and go flying out of the solar system again, but mostly in the right direction. So yeah, what I think I can do is after each, for each encounter, I can do a tiny bit of tweaking with our little 270 meters per second here to make sure that the next one is going to get us closer and closer to our grand tour of hitting the three main gas giants out here. So Jupiter, and then Uranus, and then Neptune. And Saturn as well, because I would love to hit all four. I don't know if that's actually going to be possible, but it would be super duper cool. But yeah, you can see that we are actually pretty darn close at this point to getting that, and you can see like just this little push off to the side here. It unfortunately also gets us a lot of inclination, but yeah, anyways, I'm not sure that we're going to get this perfect from here, but you know, it wasn't launched perfect when this was actually done with like the Voyager spacecraft and everything else. They were just not done quite as perfectly from launch, and we are obviously going to have to correct this a couple times, but I think we have an excellent start, so let's get to it now. So now we are just going to be spinning up and launching 6,500 meters per second. So this is going to be the fastest thing I have ever launched from Earth. Very exciting. And then we are going to use gravity assist to ride our way out and tour the outer solar system. And we should get a whole lot of really cool science out of that. But mostly I'm really excited about actually just flying by just to see the other planets, right? Like that is going to be the coolest part for me. Because it's going to take, if you take a look at this, by the time we get to Saturn, that is 23, 27, that's 6.5 years almost, and that, not to mention by the time we actually fly past Neptune is another 1,000 days or so. So yeah, it's going to be 10, 15, 20 years by the time we finish this this grand tour. So I'm going to be well past that in game terms by then. But yeah, I'm hoping to still, like, even if I'm finished up with the rest of the game, I will like fast forward to see that happen before I complete this series. I want to actually finish out all of my missions, even if I just fast forward and let my space program fall into ruin in the meantime, because that's really cool. And that's what I really like about this, is seeing the conclusion of those really cool missions. But yeah, we are just burning a tremendous amount of liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen on our way out. We have just passed escape velocity, but we are not done yet. We have a lot more yet to do. We are still burning hard and increasing our velocity. So once this is finished, we'll only have a little bit of delta V remaining, and I'm going to want to try to adjust our trajectory just slightly before we get out of Earth's sphere of influence. We'll just kill rotation. And now we have signal, of course, and we can see that we have indeed locked on this amazing spiral, leaving the inner solar, the inner part of the solar system. And we see that we have this just massive bend that is going to fling us off to our next destination. And this is without the aid of any flyby calculators. That could make your life a lot easier, but it's just not something that I've done. So yeah, such as it is. It's just because Jupiter is a very easy thing to deal with as far as these are concerned. So yeah, I'm just going to wait a couple of minutes just before we get to the geostationary altitude where I'm going to lose the ability to use, because I don't think this is a deep space avionics. It shouldn't be. It's not. So yeah, before I lose the ability to use our deep space avionics, we are going to make one last burn right about here, as I know our telenet relays. What in the heck? Why are our telenet relays all screwed up? Oh, 3 and 4. Okay, that's right. So our telenet relays are fine. 1, 2, 3. It's just there's also this derpy telenet relay 4 that happens to be in the same location because I needed to finish that contract. I remember now. So yeah, our actual telenet is just fine, thank goodness. But anyways, I know that that means that that is at geostationary altitude. So let's take a little look. And it's only going to take us 45 minutes to get out there, by the way, because we are just hustling. All right, so it looks like this trajectory is not great because it is going to give us a bit of inclination, and that is not what we are looking for. We want to not actually change our inclination all that much, because most of the outer planets are roughly in the same, at the same inclination relative to the sun. So what I'm just going to do now is I'm just going to go in and we are going to play with this a little bit. All right, so that fixes our inclination issue a little bit. You can see that that now takes this trajectory that is going to fling us up and out of the ecliptic and bends us more inward, which is going to be something that increases our velocity, which is what we need to get to Saturn. So that is what I think we're going to plan on. Let me just make sure that that is as right as that can be. Because now we have that trajectory, I can now focus on Saturn and point at Uranus and see about this part. Because you can see that this gets us a pretty far away trajectory. So we want to make sure that this is going to be working for us all the way out. And you can see that we are having trouble actually getting that to be any closer. And I think that is just something we are going to have to deal with at this point. The fact that we have this encounter is good enough for me, and then we should be able to, once we are closer to it, able to make that burn work a little bit better. So that is my plan. So let's go ahead. Sure that there's nothing. I'm a little bit concerned about this here because I don't know why this would require 2 different burns. But now that that is all settled, let's go ahead and execute this node. And that flies us away, and we can see us just leaving the Earth behind at incredible velocity. And then we slow up once again to fire these engines one last time before we, can no longer use these this avionics and this upper stage. So just imparting as much velocity as we possibly can. And there we go. Boop, done. Cool. Okay, and no issues with no issues with that, which is good. So yeah, there we go. That is what that looks like for now. So it's not absolutely perfect, but I can actually use RCS to adjust our relative. Ooh, man, that really goes fast in either direction. But yeah, that brings us pretty close. And what I can do from there is, like, when we are like either on our way or probably when we're coming close to Jupiter, I can put a node here that will much better alter our our encounter with Jupiter. And then if I do this, for example, that brings us in a little bit closer in that direction. That brings us closer in that direction. And then we can do something like this. There we go. And that starts to get us a gravity assist around Saturn, which we will need to continue our little tour. Once again, just trying to make very certain that I am not changing our inclination, but just increasing our velocity by borrowing some speed from the planets themselves. And yeah, so we'll do something like this, and I'll tweak this a little bit better once we're closer, and it can be a little bit more certain. But yeah, so that is it for now. We have up ahead, if we go back to Jupiter, focus target, you can see that we have a gorgeous encounter with Jupiter, and I will probably tweak this a little bit when we get there to make sure that that will work out. But yeah, in just a couple of years, we will be able to visit the outer planets. So it is time now to say farewell to the our Centaur upper stage. Activate these avionics. Yes, okay, everything's working. That is really good to know. Said everything is working. I think the RCS is just not on for... Okay, I do have control, so it's just a I think it's just the that issue where I need to reload the vessel. Oh, I don't have connection. Oh, look at that. Look at that. See, this is an interesting thing. So we just got connection back because we just got into range of the Canberra Deep Space Network antenna. Because even at this distance, almost at geostationary, look at how narrow this dish is at this tech level. So that is actually a good thing for being further away, but not so good when you're... maybe not so good when you are close to the planet. That's why these are useful only for really deep space communications. So yeah, set target as Saturn. Oh dear. Okay, so now that we are disconnected, we are going to have to do some interesting things. So what I think I'm going to do is at about this point, when we are when we are at our slowest and we are coming down. Oh, we still do have our Saturn encounter. That's good. I just didn't have enough patches on my maneuver. So yeah, we are going to, at about this point, I am going to plan for our encounter and make some adjustments to make sure that we hit Jupiter in a way that is very beneficial for our future explorations of the planets. And so there we go. It is off. It is headed out towards the outer solar system to explore places that we have never been able to explore before, doing the same mission as Pioneer 10 and the Voyager spacecraft. And yeah, we'll talk a little bit more about those when we get to them, when we actually get out to do the mission itself. But this is super exciting. And the fact that I was so easily able to get all of those maneuvers queued up, basically, is just so exciting for me. Like, I think it's just awesome. So I'm going to turn on all of our science, make sure we are doing everything we possibly can as we go. And we are going to set up the power low, power high automation, because it is going to be a very long time before we are dealing with this spacecraft again. There we go. So that is all set up and we are all ready to go. And that's it for this one. So that is fantastic. And I am super excited to see what becomes of this in a couple of years. All right, here on the pad, we have Lisa Kim and Thomas Reed on a terrifying Titan 3E, bringing up my approximation of the manned orbiting laboratory, what I'm calling Orblab One. 3, 2, 1, ignition. And we have liftoff immediately as we leap off the pad with our two enormous UA-1205 solid rocket boosters. So yeah, this is my attempt at the, what do you call it? The first space station contract. Yes, indeed, we are sending up what is going to be our very first space station, and we just need to rotate this a bit, I think. There we go. So yeah, this is lofting up what is going to be a space station that I'm going to leave in orbit, but I've kind of based this a little bit on the Manned Orbiting Laboratory Advanced Gemini proposal. This was something that was announced after the Gemini program, after the Gemini program, that was going to be something that was going to help them, the United States Air Force, test the feasibility of sending astronauts into space to do military missions. And of course, it was also a spy satellite type thing, but that was the announced purpose of it anyways. It got canceled, so it didn't actually, it never actually flew, but there were a lot of concepts drawn up. It apparently was competing with Vietnam War funds, and the budget cuts caused postponement of the first flights, and then it ended up being canceled entirely. Apparently there was an uncrewed test flight of the Gemini B spacecraft, which is something that I'm not sure that I'm actually using the Gemini B module here, but the Gemini B is the has a slightly larger skirt. It doesn't just go directly into the adapter retrograde section like this one, and it has the hatch in the bottom of the heat shield that allows crew to crawl down into the Manned Orbiting Laboratory itself. That is not how my Orblab One is going to work, but it's not too dissimilar. Alright, so we have ignition on our first core stage, and then separation of our spent solid rocket boosters as we continue pushing on up towards orbit. Fabulous! So yeah, this should just barely get into orbit with its full payload, which is just fine. That's really all that I'm looking for. I'm not trying to go to the moon or anything. We are just going into low Earth orbit. The contract itself asks us to get into orbit with a perigee greater than 250 kilometer and an apogee less than 2,000 kilometers, so I don't see any reason why not to just do a 300 kilometer circular orbit. And what we are going to do here is you need to launch a station with that's uncrewed and has space for crew and docking parts and stuff. So this actually might not work at all now that I'm looking at it, because I had this all boxed up together. For some reason, I feel like I looked at this and this actually worked out when I tested it, but maybe because it'll be uncrewed in a moment. Anyways, you'll see what we get to in a moment here to try to make that work. But yeah, we are just continuing to burn on up into orbit. So far, a wonderful, unexciting burn over the Caribbean. Now we are leaving the coast of Florida to bring astronauts up into space, because finally we are trying our best to get back into crewed spaceflight. Alright, so our liquid oxygen reserves are low, which I guess makes sense if we are burning it. But yeah, so we are just a couple seconds away from kicking off this first stage and moving on to our second, which will get us into a good orbit, hopefully. All right, we have hot stage and ignition, and there we go, separation. We are on our way using just the regular LR-91, which is going to put this whole module into orbit. So there's not actually a whole lot of engine ability on this thing. So this is basically going to get itself into orbit, and then that's going to be all there is to it. It's not going to be able to deorbit or anything like that. There's just going to be some debris that is just kind of hanging out. We could use, and I will use, the RCS to kind of push us away a little bit, but let's speed this up. The way that the Manned Orbiting Laboratory missions would work is basically exactly how these missions are intended to work, where I'm sending up a crew on a Gemini with a laboratory attached, to the spacecraft module attached, and really for us it's just this crew PPD-6 crew cabin, and then you can actually, if you move your crew out of the crew module, you can shut down the avionics and you can shut down all of the life support on the Gemini itself and save that all for later, and then just use the stuff that is on the the space station, and that is exactly how the manned orbiting laboratory missions were intended to work. They would launch on a Gemini, once it was in orbit, they would crawl down into the manned orbiting laboratory and shut down the Gemini behind them, stay in orbit for about a month, which is exactly what our plan is here, and then they would go ahead and go back, fire it up, and then they would go back down to Earth. And just like what we have here, that was going to work mostly in the way that it would, like it would come up in one piece, but the way that this contract is written, I'm fairly certain that I'm going to have to do this weirdness that I'm about to show you to make this work. So what we are going to do now is we are all set. We are in orbit. We can disengage our autopilot. It was just going to try to RCS finish, but we didn't have any RCS activated, so it could not do that. But we are in a correct orbit. So you see we are in the orbit that it is looking for us to get to, which is just lovely. So let's go ahead and kick off our spent stage, and that is all done. Say farewell to that, and that is lovely. All right, so this is our orbital laboratory. And looks like our RCS is all working properly, so that's fantastic. While we still have control, let's go ahead and extend our solar panels. Not do any of that, but I can. Actually, I don't need to use, so I'm actually just using the aerodynamic nose fairing, so I can decouple that, but there's nothing interesting underneath here. It's not a docking fairing at all, because I do not actually need that for this mission. So, with that finished, this is our manned orbiting laboratory. Let's go ahead and point ourselves in the general direction of the sun. One last thing to deploy, we can extend this antenna for science purposes. All right, so just killing our rotation as we are now facing the sun, getting good exposure, getting good power. The only thing that I've changed from when I built this originally is I got another level of, I got lunar rated power generation or something like that. And that gave me my tech level 2 solar panels, which are so much better and they're cheaper. They're better power, they wear out less, and they are cheaper, which is just absolutely fantastic. So these should be well over provisioned for the task that they have at hand. So all right, we are in orbit. We are where we need to be, but there is the requirement to rendezvous with your space station and for your space station to be uncrewed. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that we are controlling from the Gemini, and we are just going to decouple the spacecraft. And from here, we can now activate all this stuff and push a little bit away to make sure everything is reset properly. All right, so we are drifting just a bit, but that is hopefully okay. So what I'm going to do, what you can see now is this is basically a standard Gemini spacecraft with everything that implies. So it has the LOX-to-GOX converter, fuel cells, the whole thing. But instead of an engine down here, it actually has a little crew hatch that should be able to connect with this little this little Apollo docking system here. So these should, in theory, be able to dock with each other and have no issue in completing that part of the contract. So I am switching over to our space station. There we go, Orblab One. I wish that wasn't the name, but station Orblab One. Boop. Okay, hopefully that doesn't break anything. So yeah, that is, there we go, rendezvous with Orblab One, fabulous. So that is correct, and put your first space station in orbit. That part of the contract is indeed completed. So now we need to keep 2 crew aboard this station for 30 days, but we need to have two crew members on board first. So let's do that. We are drifting a bit away, but that is fine. Now it is time to use the Gemini spacecraft's ability. I have already, I am controlling from the docking port, so let's just go ahead and go target, part negative, make sure that we are pointed straight down the barrel, and then it's just a matter of docking and hoping that the fact that this part is seated inside is not going to be an issue of any kind. All right, so we are now approaching at 0.3 meters per second, straight down the barrel. Everything is direct. And yeah, there we go. This is going pretty well so far. No issues. I kind of wish there was a little light that I could throw on this to make this a little bit more dramatic. But yeah, we are just kind of drifting in slowly, doing the correct thing. Slowing us down a bit. Just a bit, though. So in the future, this particular spacecraft could be sent up as one piece, where you would then undock and separate from the space station and leave that in orbit. And that would be fine if I wasn't trying to fulfill the particular requirements of this contract. And I managed to drift off quite a bit there. And click. There we go. We have docked. Fabulous. So there we go. Yeah, a little undocking and redocking just for the sake of doing so. And we are now facing the sun. Everything is wonderful. Now it's just a matter of staying in orbit for 30 days. So they need to do that. And yeah, everything else looks like it's all checked off the list. Keep at least two crew aboard the station for 30 days, remain in stable orbit, then return the crew home. Fabulous. So yeah, that's really all there is to it, to this particular mission, is this now needs to just sit in orbit for a very long time. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to fire up the... Oh, engineer is required. I thought I had... Oh, I think I had, I got my crews mixed up. This was supposed to have an engineer on the crew to do a power tool evaluation, but I guess it's going to have to wait for next time. But we'll do zodiacal light photography and UHF-VHF polarization, get a little science done while we are up here. I may need to leave them in now that I'm thinking about it. But the point here is we want to transfer the crew down to the space station part. So it says crew transfer interrupted, but it doesn't actually seem to be interrupting it, so I'm not sure what that's about, but I think it's probably okay. Let's check our power situation, our info and everything else. You can see that we have perpetual power even right now, but that is because we have our fuel cells and stuff on. But if we shut down our avionics, we shut down the habitat and depressurize the capsule. Looks like it's still allowing us to run our science, which is good. But yeah, we shut everything down up on the Gemini spacecraft itself. Then we can actually go through and shut down... Don't know which one's which, so it's hard to say. Shut down the LOX-to-GOX converter, shut down the O2 pressure controller, shut down the fuel cell. There we go. So that is shutting down all of the life support modules on the Gemini portion of the spacecraft. So now, in theory, we should be running purely on the capabilities of our little crew cabin here, which has just a little avionics up here, which we can also shut down. It needed one to actually be its own thing. And this is also where I just have some Aerozine and NTO, that sort of thing. So there we go. All that is nicely shut down. We have tons of power that we are getting from our solar panels. 0.762, and that is fulfilling all of the communications and avionics and climatization and everything else that we need, even though we have shut down the processes here. So I can shut that one down also, I think. Habitat depressurizing. So we just have one scrubber, one O2 pressure controller, and everything else should be running off of the stock of oxygen, food, and water from the crew cabin itself, which now that all that is done, and I'm pretty sure we are all settled, we can just kind of go through. We have perpetual power, and that should give us enough power to last through the night, in theory. Even in the dark side, we should have plenty to make it through. We have double the amount of food, water, and oxygen that we are going to need to survive this particular trip, which is just great. That is the kind of buffer that I like to have. And then hopefully not too much of our liquid hydrogen, liquid oxygen will boil off, although some of it will. However, once we are decoupled from this, we are not going to need that much before we just head down to Earth. And just like with the Gemini B that was attached to the man orbiting laboratory, which only had about 17 hours of operational life outside of being attached to the space station itself. All of the life support, long-term life support, was in the manned orbiting laboratory and not in the Gemini portion. So yeah, that's basically it. So now I just need to put down another timer for about 30 days. 3-0. There we go. Orblab One. Boop. There we go. And that's it. That is what we are going to have here for this, and we are going to leave them up in orbit, and hopefully everything goes completely uneventfully as they finish science and prove the ability of humans to stay in space and work in space for long durations. And that is going to do it for us today. We made a lot of good progress, flung a probe at the planet Jupiter in the outer solar system, and got our first crewed space station up in orbit, which is just fantastic. If you enjoyed this episode, please let me know down in the comments below, like and subscribe and all of that, and I will see you next time.